Hi guys, welcome back to the channel for another video. This video is a very highly requested one from you guys. I have seen the words all in all over my social media, all through my Instagram messages. So recently I've done a bit of a dive on what it is you guys want to talk about. And there were two things that I was getting requests for. One was to comment on Stephanie Buttermore's content talking about her all-in journey. And second to that, my opinion or advice around applying the all-in approach to your own eating disorder recovery. So we're going to get into all of that. So yes, thanks to you guys. You keep me updated with this increasingly older, out of touch lady with what's going on. And I traced back this trend and this commentary about all in back to Stephanie Buttermore when she put out a video almost a year ago saying that she was going to adopt the all-in approach. Stephanie is a fitness and health focused YouTuber here on YouTube, what a concept, and has been documenting her own experience and journey with fitness and health and sort of disseminating information based on that experience in her content. When I went back and watched a reasonable portion of her old content, it was not unlike what you see in the fitness and health world, unfortunately. Really big focus on aesthetics, lots of body checking, and this clear pattern of restriction and deficit and intentional weight loss. And then she would also post cheat days, up to 10,000 calories in a day, cheat days.
I tried having cheat days to help sedate some of my hunger.
Oh my God.
But I realized that it was only a temporary fix.
And as a professional looking at that who helps people recover from eating disorders and disordered eating, I'm not saying that Stephanie has an eating disorder, I'm not here to diagnose, but that pattern of restriction and deficits and then that pendulum swing all the way the other way and then back and forth, which when you look at her channel, you can see there is that major behavioral swing occurring very routinely and quite predictably. It does raise concerns around what was being demonstrated and that it was being labeled as fitness and health. And unfortunately, that's just how the fitness world is conditioned and how it's conditioning all of us to believe that that is a normal style of eating. Just because something is common does not mean it's normal. So when we're equating health and fitness to a look like a six-pack or being lean or cutting, that's what it appears. I learned that from these videos, is that cutting means, you know, trying to get as lean as possible and reduce your body fat percentage as much as possible. That's a really concerning connection that we continue to see made in the fitness and health world, that the aesthetics are the indicator of health, and that's just simply not necessarily the case. So I was so encouraged to then continue on with her content to get to the all-in chapter and find that Stephanie had discovered this herself. She was experiencing really detrimental, distressing symptoms based on her eating patterns and her exercise patterns and her mentality.
Until I finally cracked.
So basically what I'm here to tell you in this video is that I am going all in.
She was experiencing exhaustion, irritability, extreme hunger, which is not surprising given these deficits that she would put herself in, not just calorie deficits, but food type deficits as well. So you don't just end up with a physical restriction, there's a mental restriction, because that pattern starts somewhere, right? You talk to yourself a certain way about food, and that sets up a mental restriction. So she was also dealing with her hormone levels being out of whack, which was a concern for her, as it is for so many women. It's a really common thing in the fitness community, guys. All these women who are a picture of health, as we stereotypically label it, who aren't getting their period because they don't have enough fat on their bodies. The amount of fat on your body has a direct impact on your reproductive system. So that was something that she wanted to correct as well. So her approach was pretty simple in concept, but in execution, obviously quite challenging. And that was to eat without restriction, eat without limits and without judgment, that she was not going to dictate her intake by numbers, but by her hunger, and start to respond to that extreme hunger that she was experiencing. She was committed to allowing her body to do what it needed to do throughout that process, for her body to hit its set point. She talked in depth and in a very knowledgeable sense about set point theory. That's a really valuable video. I'd really recommend everybody go and watch it. And it was a very informed approach. Now, in her first video, she was very focused on the physiological elements of this process and her motivations. She didn't really talk specifically about her mentality, about the impact that it had on her emotional state. She never used the words eating disorder or disordered. That reference came in a later video when she talked more about the fact that she determined that she was on the orthorexia spectrum.
A lot of people, some are more extreme than others, are more or less orthorexic. And I think I fell on that spectrum. And I don't think that I was super, severe on that spectrum.
So as far as I'm aware, she has never explicitly stated that this is in response to a diagnosed eating disorder. That's important for later points in this video. Later on in her videos, it appears that as she goes through this process and the months pass and she's eating in an unrestricted way and her weight is changing, she's changing physically, that she starts to uncover a little bit more about her previous thinking, her previous patterns, her previous beliefs, and how damaging and limiting they were, and how focused she was on her appearance and how much she derived her worth, not only personally but professionally, by her appearance, because she's not just in the fitness world as a professional, she's a fitness influencer. The pressure on those people, you guys, to maintain a certain appearance within their own community, but then in front of their audience, must be insurmountable. And she expresses that. And that's the first thing I want to give Stephanie enormous credit for. She is a trailblazer in this regard and is so brave to have shared this with her audience and to have embarked on it in the first place. And I'll tell you how I know how brave this lady is, because I hear from people in Stephanie's position who work in a similar area, who have a similar level of influence, who in their content are exemplifying, this is fitness, this is health, I live this balanced, healthy lifestyle. And then they're contacting someone like me, an eating disorder advocate and recovery coach, to say, I'm miserable, I am so lost, I am so scared about what it's going to mean if I actually change my relationship with food and exercise, because my entire career and personal life is built around it. And I'm not demonizing these people. I'm sharing this to tell you that Stephanie is not the only one who has experienced these symptoms, but she is one of the only ones to say, you know what, at the risk of my following, of my career, I am putting my mental health and my physical health first, and I'm generously sharing it with you to give you permission to do the same. Full kudos to her. And I really hope that it encourages other people in her position in that industry to follow suit. I know she's got a lot of heat and hate and trolling from her colleagues about this choice, and I can only assume it's because they're hungry, Stephanie. But it's also because it just rocks the core and foundation of what so many people have built their life and identity around. And my heart goes out to those people. I hope that if they want to go down a similar path, that they use Stephanie as an example of what's possible. And what's possible is that you can be happy and healthy and satisfied and energized and have a balanced relationship with food and exercise. What an idea. Revolutionary, right? But in this day and age, it really is. Stephanie generously shares the whole experience, the discomfort that she experiences with her body changing, the challenges she has with body image, the challenges she has with people's comments. She created great content advising people how to manage these responses. But she also shared the positives, the things she was enjoying about her body changing from a physical standpoint and from a mental standpoint as well, that it was allowing her to focus more on the core part of her character and personality that actually makes up who she is, and putting back into perspective how valuable she is based on her appearance and the fact that she doesn't have to be reduced to that she's so much more than that. She also makes it very clear throughout this series that part of her aim is to show people that you can be a higher body weight and be healthy, be beautiful, accept yourself, and that's a great message, a needed message, and a message that is needed from an industry and a corner of the internet which so often, very subtly and discreetly, tells us quite the opposite. So over time, Stephanie's eating and her movement and her attitude towards her body has, as far as her latest update, settled into this nice balance as she predicted it would. Her extreme hunger reduced. Her cravings have come back into balance. I think she's done something so needed and something so unique, and I hope that she is setting an example for others to follow. To the second part of what you guys wanted to talk about, whether or not I think that all-in is an appropriate approach to eating disorder recovery, my answer here is varied. So Abby Sharp did a great analysis of Stephanie's content and all-in approach and made a really salient connection to intuitive eating. When we look at Stephanie's attitudes towards food, her evolving relationship with food, it's very in line with the intuitive eating principles. I'd really recommend you go and watch Abby's video, especially because there's a great interview there with Stephanie, which is really insightful. And I think that's where my first concern would be about somebody jumping into the all-in approach, given it is so similar to intuitive eating. And the reason for that is this. If we start intuitive eating or all-in approach when our eating disorder or disordered mind is more dominant and the one in the driver's seat, that is the part of us that's going to be influencing our intuition. So it could be that you have 0 hunger cues. So that's your intuition. If you respond to that and don't eat, not very helpful in aiding recovery. If your current intuition tells you to throw up the food that you eat after eating it, or tells you to binge on food to cope with your emotions or to cope with anxiety, that's going to be what's influencing your intuition. To advise somebody at a stage of recovery where their healthy self, their healthy mind isn't the most dominant, and we want it to be really pretty dominant, like most of the way there for us to start implementing intuitive eating. Because I see it all the time. Clients come to me and they're like, I tried intuitive eating and it was terrible and it just made me more sick and entrenched me in my eating disorder more because it told me that I could, trust this part of myself that told me not to eat or told me to throw up my food or told me to binge. So how can that be my intuition? And they don't want to try intuitive eating again, purely because the timing hasn't been right. So yes, I believe that all-in or intuitive eating, whatever you want to call it, can be very beneficial. But it all depends on your mindset. It's not whether or not the approach is effective, it's whether or not the timing is effective. Another reason why all-in might not be appropriate at certain stages for certain people is that, well, let's take bulimia, for instance, or anorexia binge purge subtype, where you might be engaging in restrictive periods and then binging and purging. So when we have that balance to address, we have to be quite delicate with it. I do it with clients all the time where I'm trying to ease their restriction. I'm trying to increase their food freedom and flexibility whilst also not triggering the part of the disorder that's going to get overwhelmed and freaked out and binge and purge, or just purge if there's no binging component. So that's a really delicate balance. If we're going all in and overwhelming the second part of that disordered mindset, we can very often find people who react by pendulum swinging behaviorally. It can be a bit delicate depending on the person, depending on the diagnosis, depending on their stage of recovery. My final concern about implementing all-in or intuitive eating too early in the process or at the wrong time of the process is that at certain stages of recovery, we need to take an analytical and evidence-seeking /building approach. That's part of the work that I do with clients, especially initially, is to find out the function of the eating disorder. The eating disorder has a function. It showed up for a reason, it developed for a reason, it believes that it's serving a purpose. It's up for a job review and it's going to get fired. So we look at what it believes its function is, we look at its fears, its anxieties, and then we start to implement flexible, achievable challenges and goals to show the eating disorder self that its fears, its anxieties, its beliefs are unfounded. And as we continue to build up that foundation, it stops sending us the anxiety. We stop incentivizing the eating disorder to show up because we have proved to it incrementally and strategically that the reason why it's sending us 20 out of 10 life or death anxiety is not relevant. It's telling us there's a tiger loose in the house, but it's actually a fly. But we have to show it that it's a fly. So if we take the all-in approach or the intuitive eating approach too soon, we can very often lose that opportunity for our brain to rewire appropriately or effectively. If we're just flying through the physical changes, as we know, the body heals before the mind does. That's already a given in recovery and something that makes the process so challenging for so many. So to not give the brain the time that it does need to catch up, to rewire, to regulate its anxiety levels, its response levels, to give the healthy part of us the chance to see why the eating disorder behaves the way it does, and to then start stepping in and taking care of the things the eating disorder cannot take care of, then I fear that people will overwhelm themselves, that they will miss parts of the process that would have been beneficial at that time. I think All In is valuable, particularly because it is so aligned with intuitive eating, and intuitive eating was part of my recovery process, albeit the later parts of recovery. But I guess the point of this video is to say that there is no one way to recover. And Stephanie makes it very clear. She says, this is my journey, this is my experience, I'm sharing it with you. I'm not saying that you have to do it, which she's very responsible in that regard. But I do see quite a bit of discourse in the recovery community saying there's no excuse to not go all in, or why aren't you going all in? Well, because it isn't going to be beneficial for certain people at certain stages. We have to meet people where they are, not where we've been, or not where we think they should be, or what we think is right for them. That's my job as a coach, is to meet clients where they are in their progress, what's going to work for them. I don't just say, well, here's all my skills and tools and they work for you or they don't. If they don't, get out. I have to tailor my coaching and my program to each individual. If something more all-in approached and in the deep end is going to work for someone, then we try that. If something more incremental and evidence-based is going to help somebody else, then we do that. And we'll do different things at different times. We might try all of that, but you can't just take one approach and just cookie cutter apply it to everyone. I want you guys to go out and explore what's going to work for you, different treatment modes and approaches that are going to work for you. What will work for one will not work for another. Stay focused on your recovery. You will become the expert of your recovery. Yes, take inspiration from other people sharing their experiences, but if it starts to cross the boundary into being prescriptive or telling you how to recover or pressuring you in terms of certain ways to recover, just be wary. If you sense that it's not helping, don't engage with it. No professional is going to tell you there's only one way to recover. Yes, we'll tell you if something's ineffective, but there are different approaches and you've got to find what works for you. And find the support to be able to do what works for you. So we finally got to that video. I'm so happy to have it done. Let me know what you guys think about All In below, whether or not you've used it in your own recovery journey, what you found beneficial about it. Anybody who's found other approaches, just let me know your experience. Always wanting to have a chat with you guys in the comments. I will be down there. Come and find me on Instagram and Twitter under What Mia Did Next. I will be doing another recovery, coping in quarantine Q&A and chat with Millie Thomas at 11 o'clock on Monday morning. So come and follow me on Instagram for that. That's 11 a.m. Sydney time. In the meantime, guys, stay safe, stay kind. I'll talk to you soon.